Alright, what's up guys? Today I'm going to show you how to accomplish a very common task in Shopify. This is for stores that sell gifts, like maybe it's something with an engraving, maybe it's a bouquet of flowers, maybe it's a gift box like this. Either way, customers need to input some kind of message, some kind of note attached to the gift or the text that's used for the engraving, whatever. And this is another one of those things that you can use an app for, but you can also just do it easily enough by writing just a little bit of code. You can copy and paste my code and you can totally avoid having to install and pay for an app. And it's gotten even easier with Shopify 2.0. Okay, so we're just going to be using the custom liquid block type and we won't even have to edit the theme or template code in that case. Now, one more thing that I want to clarify is that the advantage of having this message field, this note field on the product page is that the note gets attached to each individual product. So, you might already have a note field on the cart page, right? But this attaches the note to the entire order. And what happens if a person orders, like companies often do this, they order a gift for like 10 of their employees. And each gift needs to have a different message, right? So in that case, that's why we need to put the message field on the product and not on the entire order. And it will come through in your Shopify admin like this. As you can see, under each product, we have a note and it will be different for each product. So this works well for large company orders. This tutorial is going to be using Dawn theme and any variants of Dawn, so all of the Shopify free themes that are for OS 2.0, they're all actually just Dawn theme as well with different presets. Okay, so this tutorial is going to work for them. If you're not using Dawn, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you, but I'm still going to explain what you need to do, and I think that you should be able to figure it out. It'll be almost the same, except there will be a few differences in the classes that you use for the look of the field and also the ID of the form. Almost everything else is going to be the same, and I'm going to walk you through that as well. Oh, and one last thing, if you want to copy and paste any of the code that I use in this tutorial, you will find it all on my website ed.codes under the tutorials link. And here I share the entire finished code and just a quick summary of the steps that we take. And yeah, that's all. Let's get started. I'm just going to hide the field that I've already built. Okay, so we're going to start from scratch. You can code along with me. We're going to add a block, custom liquid block, and here it is. Let's just type test so that we can see where it appears on the page. And we can drag it to where we want it to be. So I want mine to be under the quantity selector, but above the buy buttons. And the first thing we're going to do is to add a text area. Okay, this is a type of form field that creates a large multi-line input. So here it is, it's appeared on the page. Don't worry, we're going to make it larger. We're going to make it look a bit better. But firstly, we want it to work. I hope you have a name that you want for this field. It might be called gift note, it might be called engraving, it might be called love letter, whatever you want. Okay, you're going to use that name and put it in the ID of this field. I'm just going to call it message just to keep things simple. So we're adding an ID of message. We also want to add a placeholder. Okay, placeholder text is the text that you see appear on the field. As you can see, it's appeared here, and so the ID will be lowercase, but the placeholder will be actual sentence case because people see it. And then finally, we're going to add a name of this field, and this is going to be the most important thing. You're going to say properties and then add these square brackets and then add message inside the square brackets. Now this is the most important attribute. Okay, each of these are attributes: ID, placeholder, name. Name is the most important attribute because this is what actually sends this field to the Shopify backend. So whatever you type here, whatever you call it in between these square brackets, that's how it's going to appear here inside the order and on the cart page as well. And it has to be done using this exact wording. So properties, and then between the square brackets, whatever you're calling it. Okay, that's the first part Done. Let's hit save. So now we have this field, but it's not actually linked to the form. So this data isn't going to be sent when we click add to cart unless we also add another attribute. So just a space after this, and then you're going to add a form attribute like this. And this tells it what form it relates to, and we want to relate it to this form, which is the the quantity and the buy buttons. This is already a form. And all we need is to get the ID of this form and add it here. Now, here is where it gets confusing if you're not using Dawn theme, okay? If you are using Dawn theme, I can tell you immediately what you should do. It's just product dash form dash, and then in these curly braces, this section ID. So you can copy this, paste it in here, and that's all you need to do. So if you are using Dawn theme and you've done this, feel free to skip to the next chapter in this video. I'm just going to spend 1 or 2 minutes explaining for people who aren't using Dawn theme how they can find this form ID for their theme, because it might be a little bit different. Okay, so if you're not using Dawn, then you need to find the form ID. To do that, you can inspect any one of these buttons, and that brings up the code inspector if using Chrome or Firefox. And we want to find the form that is the parent of these buttons and this quantity field, right? So we're just going to look up this document tree and just into the parent until we find the form that contains all of those things. So here's the form, and let's read this code a little bit. So form method post action cart add. Okay, so we know it's the correct form that adds to cart. And here's the ID. The ID is product underscore form underscore, and then this random number that we're not sure what it is. So right away we can tell that it's not going to be exactly the same as on Dawn. The difference here, at least in the first part, is that instead of dashes it's underscores, and then most often it's the section ID. Now it could also be a different ID. In this case, I'm guessing that on this theme, which is broadcast, by the way, on this theme, it says data product ID, and there's this number, and it's the same number. So that lets me, guess that this number is the product ID. So in that case, all we need to do here is instead of section ID, it's product.id, and that would be the form ID for this broadcast theme. I know it's not very straightforward, and you do need to kind of figure it out a bit, but unfortunately I can't give the answer for every single theme because they're all different. Another thing that you could do is, of course, go into the code editor by clicking edit code here and looking at your theme code and looking for something like product, right? Looking for the product form. So it might be in a file like main.product.liquid, or it might be in a file called product form.liquid, not JS. You're definitely looking for a .liquid file, not .json either. So here, if I open main product and I scroll down a little bit, then I will eventually find the form. I can search for it as well, so it's faster. There's the end form tag, and so here's the form tag. And here, if we read this, we can see that it says ID, okay, ID, and then it says product form ID. And what does this mean? It means that this is a variable that's been set higher above in this file. So we can search for product form ID. Now this isn't it. We're looking for something that says product form ID equals something, right? And here it is, assign product form ID equals, and then see it's that beginning product dash form dash, and then it appends the section ID. And so when you're outputting that basically is otherwise written as product dash form dash, and then section ID, as I showed you earlier. So now that you've given your form field an ID, a placeholder, a name, and linked it to the actual form that it's inside of, everything should work. So you can go ahead and test it. Just write the word test, add it to cart, and then you can view your cart, and you should see the name of your field and then the value that you put in. Great, so that means it's working. Now all we need to do is make it look a bit nicer, and we're almost done. So to make it look a bit nicer and like it's part of our theme, we want to use CSS classes, right? Classes are written like so. It's just another attribute on a HTML tag, and then you add a class that has some CSS attached to it, some styling code attached to it. We're not going to be writing that CSS. We want to use the classes that already exist within this theme. So to find out what those are for this message field or for a text area, we can actually just have a look at the contact form that you have by default on every Shopify store. Here is a text area, okay, and we're just going to click inspect, right click and then click inspect, and have a look at the code of that text area. So we have the ID, and here are our classes, text-area and field __ input. We're going to copy those exact classes, and it should start to look exactly the same. So let's hit save, and the page should reload, and it doesn't quite look the same yet. There is probably another difference, and that is the fact that in Dawn, all fields are wrapped with this div of class field. Okay, a div is just a container. It doesn't actually mean anything. It just wraps the code to make it more organized. And the class of field, well, we can see that it does have some styling rules applied to it. So we're going to do that as well. Let's just wrap the entire text area in a div. So that closes the div. And let's give it a class of field. So there we go. That looks a lot better, a lot more like part of our theme, doesn't it? So one thing that you may have noticed just now is that our placeholder that said message has disappeared. And that's just because in Dawn, the styling of Dawn is such that the placeholder is not shown, and instead we use labels like this quantity here. So we're going to add a label element and end label, and inside of this we just need to write for. The for attribute should match the ID of the text area, so in my case it's message. Just copy and paste that there, and that links the label to the form. Inside the label we're going to write message. And lastly, just so that it's styled exactly the same way as this label, we want to use the same class, which is form __ label. So let's add that class. And there we go. It looks like it matches this quantity. So that's all there is to adding this type of simple message field to your product page. Just a reminder that on ed.codes and under tutorials, you will find the code so you can copy and paste and just change some of the things that you need to change. It is also possible to add other fields if you need to do that. You might have a customizable product and maybe you want to add a drop down, maybe a checkbox, maybe more of these fields. So if you're interested in that, please do let me know in the comments. If enough people are interested in that, I will make a video on it. But obviously it's going to be a little bit more difficult than what we just did. That's all for now. See you next time.